betcha that's the music can only mean one thing. He's on the prowl. Tony Messenger, good morning. Thanks for checking in on the Big 550 KTRS.
McGraw, how the heck are you?
We are great. You last time you were on Tuesday, you were talking about Steve Stenger and the money he got from a developer, which is now the developer has some business in front of the council. Tony, Steve Stenger wanted to respond to your segment on Tuesday. He was on the show yesterday. People heard that. You heard it. What were your thoughts as you heard his response?
Well, I was glad he called in because it when politicians start changing their stories and coming up with new explanations, it is a reinforcement that there is something to look at in this deal. And his interview yesterday reinforced in me that there are some records we're going to have to seek, because he's now giving different answers as to why the deal is a good deal. Three things he said yesterday that really struck me. The first one, and I'm sure you remember this, and I think his people understand that these sorts of interviews are recorded, but he said that it was a competitive process. He said this bid was this deal was a competitive process. And yet in the very first story that my colleague Steve Gigerich wrote on STLtoday.com, Steve Stenger was saying, oh, no, we don't do competitive bidding with real estate. Real estate is different. You can't competitively bid it. It changes the dynamic. This was a deal with one developer with nobody else being involved. And we know that because where the election board currently sits, that landlord wrote a letter to the county council that said, hey, wait a minute. Nobody even asked me about this. There's all sorts of costs related to this. Nobody's even asked me. You want lower rent? Talk to me. He wasn't given an opportunity to bid where the place exists right now. And so now Steve Stenger is saying this is a competitive process. I don't know what that means, and I don't know why he's all of a sudden no longer defending the fact that it wasn't a competitive process, but I find that very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that he had to say is that this has had some sort of both internal and external review. Again, I don't know what that means, but I'm going to file a sunshine law request to find out, because I don't recall the county council being told that this had some sort of external review. Who gave the review? Maybe that's another Steve Stenger donor. Maybe some CPA out there who's a friend of Steve, got another no-bid contract to review the no-bid real estate deal. And then the third thing that he said that I just find really interesting is he's taking credit for negotiating this deal. This is a county executive whose top donor, or at least near top donor, who he says is a friend of his, is getting this sweetheart long-term lease, and he's telling the public, by the way, I'm the guy who personally negotiated that. I made it happen. I've never heard of another politician who does that, who doesn't have 7 layers of Kevin Bacon separation between them and a deal involving their good friends. Imagine Hillary Clinton putting on a news conference today talking about how she's going to negotiate all the deals with her friends when she's the next president. Imagine the outrage. So those are my reactions to Mr. Stinger's interview yesterday. I thought it was rather enjoyable.
All right. Well, glad we could help. Now, speaking of developers, Stan Kroenke wants to develop in a floodplain here in Missouri. Are we really going to give him some TIF financing so he can build another development here in St. Louis?
I really hope not. And what is important here is that he's not the only one bidding for this Maryland Heights development. There are some other developers. So I can imagine that perhaps the city council will try to give it to somebody else. But developing in that floodplain, and you and I have talked about this before, is absolutely a horrible idea. And incentivizing it by paying the developer's way with taxpayer financing makes it 10 times worse. I believe there will be some lawsuits to try to stop this. I believe there will be overwhelming opposition from it throughout St. Louis County, in St. Charles County, in other places. The problem is going to be, and this is always the problem in St. Louis, the primary authority is going to be City of Maryland Heights. And the City of Maryland Heights sees this as a rob Peter to pay Paul situation. We're going to get ours. We're going to go ahead and give our taxpayer dollars and your taxpayer dollars away to this developer because we think he's going to bring a bunch of retail sales tax to us. And to heck with what it does to the region, to heck with the fact that it's going to push flooding around, to heck with the fact that someday that levee is going to fail and that development's going to flood and taxpayers are going to be online for another bailout.
Well,
for all of those reasons, developing in the floodplain is a really bad idea. Sadly, Stan Kroenke's like 10th or 11th on the list as to why we shouldn't be giving taxpayer money to that guy.
Well, the mere fact that we had the Christmas holiday where Highway 70 flooded for the first time, this flooding is getting to be a real issue, and you need places for the water to go because it's going to go somewhere.
Well, and that's the thing that municipal leaders don't get. Note that Steve Ellman, the county executive in St. Charles County, has been really vocal about floodplain development because he knows that when municipalities in St. Louis, like Maryland Heights, build new levees and then say, oh, look, we have this magic farmland that we can turn into a mall, that water, as long as that levee is lasting, as long as it's working, that water is going to get pushed somewhere else. And it's going to get pushed, much of it, into St. Charles County because you build a new levee, it affects where the floodwaters go or don't go, and it backs up in other places. And so this idea that we can just build a new levee and protect this magical area and bring, honey and development and malls and everything else to any area with a floodplain, it's madness. And it's even exponential madness during an age of climate change in which all of our former understandings of where the floodplains are and should be are really changing because we don't know where the water's going to go. We don't know how high it's going to go. We don't know how often those storms are going to come. Flooding is a big deal in this region, and any development in a floodplain with tax incentives should be frowned upon.
Tony Messenger, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist. Tony, thank you for your time. I should also tell you a little programming note. We just got a call from Steve Stenger's office. He wants to join us at 8:50 to rebut and to comment on what you just said. So keep your radio tuned to the Big 550 KTRS,
Good
Tony.
for him.
Thank you,
Thanks
sir.
a lot.
All right. That's right. Steve Stenger will respond to Tony Messenger's response to Steve Stenger's response, which was responding to Tony Messenger's response, which was from a column he wrote. If that makes any sense to you, he'll do that at 8:50, which is, 24 minutes from now. Stay right there. 8:25.